listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me, non-judgmental talk about infidelity with Dr. Marie Murphy. If you're looking for new perspectives on complicated relationship issues, you've come to the right place.
Days go by, they're crawling by.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Marie Murphy. This podcast is all about expanding the conversation around infidelity. I'm a relationship coach, and I specialize in helping people who are cheating on their partners or engaging in some form of infidelity deal with their feelings, clarify what they want, and make decisions about what they're going to do. I offer shame-free, blame-free, non-judgmental relationship coaching. And you can talk to me about all the things that seem too messy or weird or stigmatized to share with your best friend or your spouse or even your therapist. To learn more about me and my work, or to schedule an introductory coaching session with me, go to my website, mariemurphyphd.com. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with a writer known as Mona Lisa. Mona is a middle-aged adulteress who found her way out of her dead bedroom and into the world of affairs, which she navigates without fear. She's the founder of the medium publications The Scarlet Letter and P.S. I Hate You, and she's published over 300 articles with over 250,000 views, and she's got more than 2,000 followers. You can find her work under the name Mona Lisa Smiled on Medium and follow her there too. She writes about every facet of adultery, from the joy to the pain. And today we're going to talk about some of that joy and pain. So Mona Lisa, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hi, Marie. Thanks for having me on your show.
My pleasure. So let's give everyone a sense of where you're coming from. Can you tell us a little bit about your marriage and how you got to the point of thinking, maybe I need to have an affair. Maybe I need to step outside of the marriage.
I've been married for 22 years and I've known my husband for 25 years. We've had a dead bedroom for the past 9 to 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So when a dead bedroom is classified by sex less than 10 times a year, but in my case, it's less than 10 times a year. So I think for the first 3 to 4 years of our dead bedroom, I was completely celibate. There's absolutely nothing. There was no contact. I mean, in any which way, shape, or form. And I think my husband has some issues sexually with erectile dysfunction and premature ejaculation. And I think there was a lot of shame and stigma, and he didn't want to address it with a doctor. And he didn't want to admit that he had any issues.
Oh, interesting. Did you guys try and talk about this?
I had specifically asked my husband if he would, possibly take Viagra. And he said no. And I asked him if he would talk about it with a doctor and maybe see if there was a health condition that was behind it. And he was like, I'm fine. There's not a problem. And so it really became an issue of me still feeling very sexual and very, I would say, wanting to have that, that intimacy. And he wasn't willing to try anything.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How was your sex life before things kind of went downhill?
So I don't think our sex life was ever great, but it was satisfactory. Sexually, I was more about what's characterized as a high libido, and he was characterized more as a low libido. So it's an interesting dynamic. Usually it's the opposite. Usually it's the man who's the high libido and it's the woman who's the low libido.
Not always, though. Yeah.
Yes, not always.
Yeah.
But it's often that you see the opposite. And in my case, I had come into the marriage with plenty of sexual experience and knowing what I wanted in terms of, a bed partner. And I married my husband because I genuinely loved him, but he was a virgin when we married. And he was willing to Now he wanted to wait, which I thought was charming until we actually, were wed. But in the end result, I figured, oh, this is going to be great. This will be a guy that I can kind of coach as to what I
Yeah.
want in bed.
Yeah.
Like I could teach him.
Right.
And in the end
The
result,
world is our oyster
exactly.
together. And this is all going to be new and exciting. And I'm going to show him all this fun stuff.
Exactly. And I really had a lot of respect for him because he wanted to wait, and he really wanted to find a partner that he wanted to be with before exploring his sexuality. But what I didn't realize was part of the lack of sexuality was fear and guilt and
Yeah.
trepidation.
Yeah.
And it could be a combination of societal conditioning, his parents, I don't know, but it's
All the
variety.
things.
It's
Yeah.
a bunch of different things together. And
Yeah.
he wasn't particularly sexual, and he wasn't particularly open, and he wasn't willing to try different things. And I realized that on our honeymoon. And part of me wanted to back right out of the marriage right then and there. So it was tough. It was a tough go for me because I didn't know what I should do. I didn't
Yeah.
want to, stay in a marriage where I wasn't feeling that, that connection.
Yeah.
But at the same point, I felt tremendously guilty having just been married, and having, not wanting to stick with it.
Yeah.
So
Oh my God. Yeah.
it was a dilemma, and there was a lot of shame and stigma around, getting divorced in
Sure.
my family.
Sure.
So I didn't feel like that was a possibility to do.
Yep. Let me just pause you and say something. I think a lot of people listening are really going to resonate with that. I hear this all the time. Like, people in my family don't get divorced. Like, it's
Yes.
just not something anyone's done before. And I can't imagine how people would react if I were to get divorced. And this
Right.
is a big thing. And I just want to say for the record and for listeners that even as our norms in society change a lot, even as divorce isn't like quite as taboo as it used to be, it's certainly much more of a possibility than it was 20, 40, 50, 60 years ago. There are still people for whom, there would be a lot of reaction from their community if they were to get divorced. And that weighs heavily on people's minds.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I, having come from a background that's, fairly conservative, and my husband's background is conservative as well.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't feel like I could just, get up and not go through with it. My husband and I certainly had a better sex life before the erectile dysfunction came into play. And it wasn't great because it still wasn't often enough for me, but it was warm, and it was satisfactory, but
Yeah.
it wasn't like blow your socks off amazing.
Right.
But also I had like I had a genuine joy in being with him sexually.
Cool.
So now, having had none, and me finding myself in this very, very dead bedroom, with a husband who really wasn't willing to address any of the issues, I was in a quandary.
Yeah.
I didn't know quite what to do.
Yep.
Because I, obviously masturbate and happily masturbate, but it didn't satisfy me, and it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And so the issue was, how do I get to a place where I could feel like alive, and I could feel some physical joy?
Yeah.
That was part of the impetus, or I should say, that was the impetus of looking, being completely celibate in a marriage and not having any other outlet.
Yeah.
And so then I started to think, this is something I can't live like the rest of my life with no sex.
Sure.
And it's just, I was too young at that point. I think I was like in my, let's say early mid 40s.
Yeah.
And I just felt like, I couldn't go through another 20 years or 30 years of potentially having nothing.
Yep. Hang on a second. Let me just say that good on you for being able to articulate this. I think a lot of people struggle with even being able to acknowledge this to themselves. Like, look, I'm just not willing to go the rest of my life or the rest of my marriage if it doesn't end tomorrow without a sexual outlet with another person.
Right.
Yeah.
And it becomes heavy, like it weighs on you. And of course, I went through all of the typical female experiences of this, which were, I'm not beautiful enough. I'm not attractive enough. I'm not desirable enough. Am I ever going to be enough for anyone? And those years were tough. I was really, really depressed for a while. And part of it was the feeling of, being shut down in terms of physical affection. The other part of it was just feeling very alone in my marriage.
Yeah.
And another part of it was just seeing that I was getting older. It was just a sense of time moving fast and time moving quickly. And you kind of come to a realization that you're like, well, nothing in this world is, things don't happen, I should say it's kind of like, you don't want people to realize how sad you are and you want to try to make a change. And I, of course, realized that I needed to maybe look for some avenue outside of my marriage. And I didn't actually pursue anyone. A guy that I know pursued me, and he kind of landed in my lap. And that was like my first affair. It wasn't a man that I specifically chose in the sense like I went to look for him online or in person. It was a person who was a family friend who's known me for 20 some odd years and who had said to me once, oh God, I've always wanted you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, wait, I'm married. And he's like, yeah, I know you're married, and he's like, but I still want you.
Yeah.
And I thought about it, from a point of view of saying, no, I can't do that. I'm absolutely can't do that.
Yeah.
And so I had rebuffed him for months and months and months. And he had really never stopped just, trying to talk. And, and then at one point we met. I had written about this actually.
Yep.
And we met in a park and we started to talk, and he just like gently put his hand on my arm, and it was like that gesture of like that warmth and that kind of willingness to like touch me really just broke something in me. And it made me think, maybe I do want to have, an affair.
Hang on a second. Tell everyone who's listening the name of that article in Medium so they can find it if they want to read it.
This is why I won't remember the entire title. It's long, but why I won't stop cheating. Why I can't stop cheating on my husband. But I can look it up exactly and let you know.
Okay.
The title of the article is actually kind of long.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't remember all
That's
of it.
That's okay. I have the same problem.
But it's basically along the lines of why I won't stop cheating on my husband.
Yeah.
Or I've had an affair and I won't stop cheating on my husband.
Okay. That's enough information for people to figure it out. Okay. So this dam breaks inside of you, and, this is my paraphrase, not yours. So tell me where I'm wrong, but it's like, oh my God, wait a minute. Like, this is amazing. This could be really good. Maybe this is like essential to my experience of being alive. Then what?
So we had met, and, and I had set out the parameters right away. If we do something, this is going to be just sex, quote unquote. It can't be anything more. Are you okay with that? And he was nodding his head. Yes, absolutely. I'm like, you understand that, I won't leave my husband, that, I have family responsibilities and all these, essential obligations, to live up to. And he's like, yes, I understand. And this man is single. So he didn't have to lie to his he didn't have anybody that he was with. He didn't have
Yeah.
a significant other or a girlfriend. There
Yeah.
wasn't anybody that he was with.
Yeah.
So, and I said, are you okay with, with this, with it being what it is? And he's like, yes, absolutely. He's like, I've always wanted to be with you. And so then when we actually were together, sexually the first time, it was okay, but it wasn't that great. And I remember thinking, I'm like, oh, like, why bother? Why even do this? Like, why? It wasn't even great. Like I figured, the sex should be like fireworks and like,
Right. Right.
rainbows, like,
Right. Unicorns.
Unicorn should be like this
Magical.
amazing sexual connection, but it wasn't because
Sure.
of course it was our first time
Yep.
too.
Yep.
And it wasn't great. And he apologized. He said, he goes, I know it wasn't that great today. He goes, but he goes, this is it. Like we're learning each other. He's like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's just the first time, And
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I'm like, should I just pull back and not do it at all? You know what I mean? Just consider this a one-off and then I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
And he addressed it. He said, he goes, don't. He's like, he's like, it's just the first time and it's not indicative of all of what could happen. And we were, we've had, our affair has been, oh gosh, it's been on and off for 5 years already, but mostly on for 3, in the sense 3 years of hot and heavy. But he's not been my only partner.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of it is, he has some health issues now, which are impeding any kind of like, if we haven't been intimate in a while.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been years, but we're friends. We're still friends.
Yeah.
And we still text and we still talk to each other. So I do feel like if you're in an affair, ultimately it should be based on hopefully a little bit more than just sex. It should be based on some sort of friendship.
Mm-hmm. So that's your preference, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's ultimately a deeper connection. And you also feel like as if there is a genuine, like, a rapport. Mm-hmm. Although obviously I've had both too. I've had affairs that are based on just a sexual connection. And then I've had them based on more of an intimate, friend scenario.
Okay. Give us like a brief overview of like your experiences with adultery. What's been great? What's been hard?
So the great things about adultery are the freedom to try different things sexually that you could never pursue at home.
Yeah.
And it's like discovering your pleasures of your body in a way that you couldn't have before.
Right. That wasn't available to you in your marriage. You mean.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's it's an amazing thing. That's a really a joy. I think one of the pleasures of adultery is feeling in touch with your body and feeling in touch with your sexuality and fulfilling some of your desires as well as those, the desires of your partner. I also think adultery can be very freeing and empowering as well. Like it can make you view your body and your self in a more positive light. Like for many years, I felt undesirable and I felt like I wasn't a woman that would ever be looked at, let's say twice. Mm-hmm. And then when you're in an affair, you realize you're like, oh, like there are people who will like me just as I am. And,
right.
And they'll be interested in what I have to offer. And it's empowering and freeing. Yeah. So I definitely feel more in touch with like who my physicality, but also my femininity and, my sexuality. So I think those are the great things about adultery. And
presumably it's important to you to stay in your marriage. Otherwise you would have left or something or done something else here, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So talk about that a little bit. Why do you choose to stay? What's important to you in that connection and that set of relationships?
So again, because I've been with my husband for, I've known him for 25 years. I feel like we've been through so much together as a couple, and we've it's, there's a real comfort and a familiarity and a warmth there, that over 25 years, it's a long time. And this relationship is one that I feel like, not just because of societal expectations, but certainly because of them.
Sure.
I feel like it's important for me to fulfill my obligations. And, and I have children, and it's part of it is just being able to keep the entire family unit together.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I have a tremendous, I do have a depth of affection for my husband. I don't show this in my writing, because there's really nothing sensational or, immediately gravitates, towards like a sensational product. But, when you're in a long-term marriage, you have, lots of intimacy, and there's warmth, even if there's not sexual intimacy.
Well, some people have a lot of warmth, even if there isn't sexual intimacy, but some people don't.
Yeah.
But I mean, the point for you is that there is warmth in the relationship. There is something that you value within the relationship, even if the bedroom has been, a dead scene for a long time, it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, what I would wish is for my husband and I, and we still have some intimacy. I'd wish for more. Obviously I want more. I would like to have, even if we don't have any kind of quote real sexual connection, I would like to have some hugging or
more
some
affection.
Affection.
Yeah.
In my case, it doesn't happen much in my marriage. There's not a tremendous amount of physical display of affection, but we do have a comfortable warmth together.
Mm-hmm.
So it is, those are some of the things that you need to, if it's in everyone's marriage, it's something different.
Yeah.
But the bad part about adultery, or the summary of adultery that would be on the bad side, would be all of the experiences that have to do with an ending of a relationship.
Yes.
And this is when, you really kind of go through it's a breakup, but you can't even talk about it with anyone.
Exactly.
So essentially it's a breakup.
Sorry, let me just pause you and say that that's exactly right. When an affair comes to an end, it's a breakup, it's a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And most people can't tell anyone about it. And I can't tell you how many clients I've had that come to me, in this state of distress, and because they've finally gotten to the point where they have to talk about this and they have no one else they can talk to about it. And it's tragic.
Yeah, that's the hardest.
Yeah.
Because you can't discuss it with anyone. And you're completely torn asunder. It's an awful feeling.
Yeah.
So, and breakups hurt.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of pain and longing with adultery anyways, that you can't visualize with a quote unquote normal relationship. I mean, normal relationships have their version, their amounts of pain and longing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if you're in a, meeting, whatever, how many times a week or month or year, and you're in this relationship where you're really not accessible to that person, but you want to be with that person.
Yep.
There's, it just intensifies the despair and the longing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because it's like the impediments of that create that. So definitely, this is part of what I call the adultery roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it also the lifestyle. So it's the roller coaster part is the highs are really high and the lows are really low.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure other clients of yours have said the exact same thing.
Yeah, totally. I talk about it as everything being amplified within the affair bubble.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's just the heightened drama, the scarcity of being able to spend time together, the limits on communication. It's just, oh my God, it's such an intense place to be. And, as you mentioned in some of your articles, which we're going to segue into here, not being able to talk about these relationship challenges, the same way that you might talk about other relationship challenges with other people in a routine way adds to that tension or adds to those challenges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you find, you obviously can't tell people, and who you might tell would be, a best friend. In my case, I have told one girlfriend, who is my bestie, and she's single and she's completely non-judgmental. But even she feels like after a certain point, like I can't handle this anymore. Like, just, you know what I mean? Like, stop talking already.
Yeah.
And so there's
pause real quick. Let me just ask you why you think that is. What is your impression of why she's like, okay, I've reached my limit. I don't want to hear anymore.
Well, because I think part of it is that she can't relate because she's never been in this situation at all either.
Sure.
And she's never been married and she's never had an affair. So obviously both of these concepts are pretty foreign to her. And I feel like my girlfriend has this, she's a little built-in squeamishness about sex and sexuality. So in her case, she has, like, she just doesn't get that. Like, she just doesn't have that in her. You know what I mean?
Right.
So she likes to hear a little bit, but she doesn't understand it.
Yeah. She can't really relate to the like primal desires at play here and why they're important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, so that's basically what I feel.
That's interesting. Let me tell you just what I think about that too. I mean, I think that all makes sense, but I also observe this tension in our society and within individual people that, like, on the one hand, we're fascinated with infidelity, right? Like when celebrities cheat, we want to know about it. And we want to like know all the details and like follow them on social media and say horrible things to them or about them or whatever. But on the other hand, when we start to think that infidelity could happen in our lives, that somebody could cheat on us, we start to get really uncomfortable. People don't like to think about that. It freaks them out. And so we have this, this love-hate relationship to people cheating, to other people cheating. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think that people have an inherent insecurity. Like, of course, in any case, like, will he leave me for her? And, will I, all of those things, like essentially feeling like I'm not good enough to keep him, and it does, it's a destabilizing element. Yeah, sure. When we're perpetually scared that, cheating could happen to us. And if it does, our lives are going to be destroyed and we aren't going to be good enough and all of these things, it creates this specter in our minds and in our hearts that can play out in very interesting ways. And this is part of why, I talk about cheating as a neutral circumstance, and I mostly work with people who are doing the cheating or have been doing the cheating, but I also work with people who have been cheated on. And what's really interesting is that when we believe that cheating is the worst possible thing that someone could do to another person, or the worst possible thing that could happen to us, whatever position we're in, it makes it harder to feel better and to move on in our lives and to quote unquote heal and to make changes that we want to make when we believe that cheating is like the big bad thing. Right. Makes sense. Yeah. And I think in general, when you're looking at people who are, I've tried to write articles from both point of views, from people who have obviously cheated like myself. And I've published stories that have been sent to me by readers. But I've also gone online and read on various subreddits and a website called Chump Lady, instances where people are, beyond traumatized from their partner's infidelity. Yeah. To the point where it's completely, what would be a good word? Like, it rocks them to their core and they are left shattered. It feels like they're left without anything. And you think, at least for me, I read it
as a wake-up call, like this is legit, not necessarily what would happen in my case, so to speak, but it is what happens to some people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And and there's so much pain there. So I don't shy away from what I do in terms of how I see it, in terms of how I understand that it can bring real pain and hurt.
Yeah.
And so I understand the ramifications of it.
Yeah. Here's the but though. And I mean, this is like a tangent that I don't want us to spend too much time on. Like, we usually think that our pain is caused by other people and what they do or don't do. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And while I would be the first to say that, yes, other people and their actions are, often the occasion of our pain, we're a whole lot freer when we realize that other people don't directly cause our pain.
Absolutely.
Our pain is caused by how we view their actions, and there's a big difference between being shocked to find that somebody's cheated on you and upset and hurt and angry and all of those things, and digesting those emotions and making decisions about what you want to do and acknowledging that, yeah, this experience surprised me and it sucked. And being like, this person screwed me over. They're horrible. I'm traumatized. I'm never going to recover from this. Like, my life is ruined, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly.
So there's a big difference.
Absolutely. And there are people who will take that victim mindset and live with it, indefinitely. Yeah. And they'll almost relish being in that victim mindset.
Yes.
And then there are other people who will take that trauma, the original trauma, and again, like you said, digest it and maneuver through it and work through it, and then come out with a stronger sense of themselves, and whether or not they decide to stay in the partnership or whether they decide to leave the partnership, they still they've internalized it, but they haven't got to the point where they've realized, they don't feel worse about themselves.
Right.
Right. They come to a realization that it's how they view themselves, and they don't want to be a victim.
Yeah, totally. We could go on about that, but I want to bring us back to, this question of like wanting to be able to talk about your experiences.
Yes.
Say a little bit about that. What would you like to be able to talk about more?
Well, I think writing for me originally was the way to be able to express myself. So when I started writing, I hadn't read much online that was a pro infidelity. I mean, I hadn't read much that had to do with a woman who wanted to cheat.
Yep.
Most of what I had read online was, oh, he cheated on me and this is terrible. And how do I get him back? Or what do I do now?
Right.
Or some version of, he betrayed me and, I'm stuck, or woe is me, or what am I going to do?
Right.
And there wasn't a lot. I had looked at the Medium, but I had also looked at many other, sites online, and I had read a lot of books, and I was trying to figure out what was out there that was relating directly to my experience. That was a woman who still was in a very, in a long-term marriage, but still wanted to step out because of a dead bedroom.
Right.
And there wasn't a lot out there. So I felt like everything was tamped down. Like dead bedrooms weren't discussed at all because of the shame of having one.
Right.
And I can't tell you how many people I've spoken to having written that say that they have dead bedrooms now.
Yeah.
And nobody was talking about like this idea of a woman my age, I'm in my early 50s, to have like the desire for, an affair, and
the desire for really hot sex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. A lot of it was this idea of like, there just wasn't anything out there that had, that was relating to me directly. So me being able to write was definitely a tremendous like release. To be able to talk about my experiences. And even though it was into an internet void at that point, like I was writing into my laptop and I wasn't even focused on publishing anything, it was a way to be able to like release some of the stuff that I had in my head.
Yeah.
I did I did go to a therapist.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I did go to a therapist for a period of 9 months.
Hold on. When you went to the therapist, what was your agenda? What was your intention? What did you want to get out of therapy?
Well, I specifically had sent her actually almost like a proposal via email. And I basically said, this is what I'm doing. And can you discuss with me? And she was willing to discuss it all with me. So I did feel like I got some good out of it.
Can you be specific about what that good was?
I feel like, she listened to all of what I was doing, and she wasn't particularly judgmental. I mean, she actually wasn't as judgmental as I thought she would be.
It's a low bar.
I mean, exactly. It was a low bar. It was a low bar. Part of it was this idea of her creating like a safe place just for me to talk.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't feel like I got to the point where I wanted to stop cheating.
Yeah.
Which is where I wanted to get to.
So you went to her wanting to get to a place where you wanted to stop cheating.
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to say, okay, at the end of seeing her for 9 months, that I would stop cheating and my life would go back to the way it was before.
Okay.
But of course, having seen her for months, week after week, month after month, I never got there.
Mm-hmm.
There was something in me that was still, like very much, and she put it as, you're enamored with the thrill of the lifestyle. And it's true. It is addictive. I think the lifestyle, the headiness of the sex and the desire.
Yeah.
It's tremendously addictive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's something to be said for that.
Yep.
So they call that limerence or new relationship energy.
I know. It's funny. I have a podcast episode coming out on all this stuff. I think it's maybe going to drop the week before this one will, or something like that. Yeah. But what I want to jump in and ask you is, my take on all that stuff is that humans are looking to feel good in all kinds of ways. Right. We do all kinds of things in the pursuit of pleasure and excitement. And
yes,
we get our thrills in a lot of different ways. Is this a bad thing for you?
I would say in some ways, yes. And in some ways, no. Mm-hmm. It's good because obviously I'm getting sex that I need, the intimacy that I need, because if I was completely celibate in my marriage, as I would be if I was at home, in the sense like, I wouldn't have there wouldn't be any kind of intimacy.
Right.
And I'd be depressed. Like I would be legitimately feeling very down.
Yeah.
And then, so that's, that's part of it. I think people do find things to create pleasure in their lives. Is it as destructive as drugs? Maybe not. Is it as destructive as alcohol? Maybe not. Is it as
hang on a second. Let me just put this in for perspective. Some people like drink a little bit, maybe a little bit, quote unquote, too much sometimes, but it doesn't fundamentally have impact on their lives that they consider problematic. Some people are functional heroin addicts for, like 40, 50 years, and it's okay in the sense that it's not creating consequences that they dislike.
Right.
We love to get into this good and bad stuff. This like, should we be doing it or should we not be doing it? Like, we love to demonize certain behaviors, but I mean, the question that I'm asking you is, within the context of your life, what's working? What isn't working for you?
Well, I think adultery is definitely working.
Yeah.
I do. I think
sounds like it.
It's a way to create joy, and definitely a way to create the much needed intimacy that I need.
Yeah.
Plus, I also enjoy completely dissecting this lifestyle and writing. So I completely enjoy writing about it. Probably even more than doing it. I love writing about it. So I have a sociology background, so there's definitely a sense of like me looking in from the outside and analyzing this kind of overarching narrative, and I just love it. So there's something tremendously interesting to me
You're doing research
about researching the lifestyle. Absolutely. But yeah, in terms of actual being, demonizing it, I do see that I think there are, certainly people who would say, what you're doing is absolutely wrong. And
Sure
there are people who have written to me and have said, absolutely, you're heinous, you're awful,
You're bad.
You're bad.
Yeah.
You should just divorce.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I know. I mean, I get all that hate mail too. Like, I get it. Like, people are like, you're encouraging cheating. And it's like, no, it's so much more nuanced than that, people.
Yeah.
So much more nuanced. But let me ask you this, like, how do you navigate the difficult aspects of this in your own life without looking at them as bad, just looking at them as challenges? How do you navigate those?
I would say probably by compartmentalization, which is a very big word for trying to keep your feelings separate from each other. So it's basically trying to understand that I have different roles to play in different parts of my life. So I have a good daughter role. I have a good mother role. I have a good wife role. I have a good lover role. I have a good worker role in the sense of my job. And I have a good writer role. So these are all roles that I'm playing.
Yeah.
And some of them are more linked than others. And some of them I keep very separate. So I've been writing for years and years and years. And I don't think my husband has ever read anything I've written. So there is like a sense of disconnect. Like I write for me, but I could never share my success in actual real life. So the irony of me having over 250,000 views and thousands of followers, the irony and making money off of it is that I can't share that with my husband.
Yeah. Interesting.
I mean, I find it very ironic. Like there's so many parts of this lifestyle that I'm like, isn't the irony is I have success. Even if I were to publish the book that I had written, which was about adultery, and let's say I did have like amazing success with this book, which I do think it could potentially be like an amazing book to, like an incredible bestseller. The irony of it is that it would never be able to own it.
Yep. You'd never be able to tell anyone unless you were to press the blow up my life button.
Exactly. And so that's the interesting part about it, is that there's this sense of success, but it's all hidden, like, and I find that probably one of the most I find that one of the most interesting parts of all of this.
The word that's coming to my mind is bittersweet.
Absolutely. Bittersweet.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. It's bittersweet because there's a sense of like joy in everything. And then there's a sense of like that bitter taste afterwards. Like you can't fully enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. I mean, I think on the one hand, and I maybe we talked about this the other day when we chatted, on the one hand, like the challenges and joys within infidelity and having affairs are just sort of a microcosm of the challenges and joys of life in any other arena. And that's what I think is so often lost on people that aren't, participating in infidelity or aren't even like interested in thinking in depth about infidelity. In a sense, it's a very specific thing. It's a very specific set of experiences, but in another way, it's just the same stuff we're all living out in one form or another in our lives. How do we become who we really want to be in life? How do we juggle our different roles? How do we make room for contradictions in our lives? How do we, accommodate all the really important parts of ourselves? How do we experience the things we most want to experience?
Right. And it's universal. Because I've spoken to enough adulterers in terms of writing. And in terms of on our adultery, there's a tremendous amount of universal principles that relate to all of us.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
And
Yeah.
divorce doesn't solve everything either. I mean, certainly it'll remove the stigma of cheating, but it doesn't solve the issues that really are at stake in terms of, becoming the person that you want to be, or et cetera.
It doesn't automatically guarantee that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. One thing I see with folks all the time is that they kind of mistake one problem for another, or mistake a solution for another. In other words, when we get clear on what we really want,
Yeah.
we sometimes see that the way we think we're going to get it isn't necessarily the only way to get it.
Right.
But a lot of the time we aren't clear on what we really want. And that makes it really hard to get it when we're chasing things that don't really provide us the things that we're looking for.
That's true. That's true. And you definitely feel like as if when you're, at least when you're in this an adultery type of bubble, it feels like you're encapsulated.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like you're almost like hermetically sealed from the outside.
Yeah.
And nothing, it doesn't feel like your experiences can relate to other people's experiences. Like, this is unique. I'm the only one going through all of this.
Mm-hmm.
But what I've noticed, and what I've noticed with all the writing, is that it resonates because it's not unique.
Yeah.
The experiences that I have had in my affairs,
Yeah.
of the vibrancy, the feeling alive, the coming to a point where I'm I don't know, this sexual culmination, however you would describe that, it's described by other people as well.
Right.
And there's or most of us who are in this are going through the same things.
Yeah.
So it's just that it wasn't talked about, or it isn't talked about, and it's not related to, but many of us are going through the same things.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. I couldn't agree more. Unfortunately, I think that's probably our time for today, but this is a great note to wrap up on. And I want to say two things here. One is that, often folks come to me and tell me like, you're the only person I've ever talked to about this. And I'm happy to play that role. And that's partially why this podcast is called Your Secret is Safe with Me. And if you need to talk about your infidelity situation, I'm here for you. You can find me at mariemurphyphd.com. But the other thing I want to emphasize is that Mona and her collaborator have created these great resources online where people talk about their experiences. And you can go and see that other people are probably dealing with things that are similar to what you're going through if you're in an infidelity situation. So Mona, tell everybody about where they can find you in your work and how they can get in touch with you if they want to.
So it's the Medium, Mona Lisa Smiled, and you can see me on Vocal at Mona Lisa Smiled, and you can Patreon or Ko-Fi me at Mona Lisa Smiled to support me if you'd like. All my writing, 300 plus articles, and all the work is on the Medium. So I would love to have support, but the Scarlet Letter, which I founded, is a great resource for so many different types of articles about infidelity, from Marie Murphy's work to my work to my writing partner, Teresa J. Conway, her work, and many more. We relate adultery in so many different facets. So I think it's definitely worth a look from anyone's perspective, even if you're not a cheater or if you are a cheater. I think it's fascinating to look at the amount of sheer willingness for people to talk about it.
Yeah.
And thousands of followers. So I think we're hitting something right. People are listening.
Yeah.
People are interested.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you guys have done such an amazing job of creating a platform to give voice to things that people haven't talked about that much, at least not publicly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
definitely. No, I appreciate this. I think it's great. I think it's a great way for people to see the question in maybe a larger format.
Yeah, for sure. All right, Mona, thanks so much for talking with me today. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure's mine. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. If you have enjoyed what you've heard, I hope you'll head on over to iTunes to rate and review the show. Until next time, bye for now.
Thanks for listening to Your Secret is Safe with Me with Dr. Marie Murphy. Make sure to click subscribe to get updates on our latest episodes.